I sort of get me out of it.
To the nearest bar, perhaps. But do you regret not going further now?
Yeah, kind of wish. I'd quite like to go back and film it actually, because I mean, if she's still alive. But the Femminili are extraordinary because they have this sort of, because Patrizia, who's doing the lotto, which is reading the numbers and interpreting the dreams, is also Femminili. And they have this almost sort of shamanistic role, which you get in India too, where they kind of conduits between the corporal and the spiritual worlds. And they're tough, really tough. Because they've lived on the streets, they've had tough lives, and they're not going to give anything for nothing. So money does have to pass hand.
So that was the point where you didn't feel you were violating privacy because you became
no,
a transaction.
exactly so. And of course one of them wanted to sue me afterwards. But that was the only two occasions where I didn't chance upon the scene. I had to actually.
You had to research, find access, pay.
But it was worth it. It was an amazing experience. I mean, to see something which is that ancient happening in a modern city in Europe is extraordinary.
It is absolutely extraordinary. I love the picture of the family, and I love your caption story because I think it's probably over-romanticising to say you were made to suffer for your art, but you were slightly ridiculed as you were taking a photograph or spending time.
But
were you aware of it at the time?
I had two Neapolitan friends who were just cringing with embarrassment as they listened to all these old ladies ridicule my sexuality. It was quite, I had no idea what was going on. I did record it though, I got it on tape. And it's very strange, Lotto. It's kind of, it's like bingo, two fat ladies, but actually what happens is, if you have a dream about a cockroach with a broken leg, you go to the Lotto office, where the old lady finds a really old book, and the corresponding number for a cockroach is 66, for example. And then you go, but no, but it had a broken leg, what number is that? And then, you know, it is, then once you have all your numbers, you then go and play your bingo. So it's
superstition and scam.
Exactly. And it's, again, very sexual too. In the reference, the numbers refer to lots of sexual stuff.
We've already touched upon the self-portraiture and your mood and so on, but when you see the images that you've made, specifically of Naples, does it take you back to an intensely personal moment, or is there now so much distance between you and that moment, both in terms of time and temporal distance, but also emotional and intellectual distance, that you can't really remember the state of mind you were in? Because you must have taken many photographs.
Yes, I know, and I've acted in different moods in many different moments.
So the answer is they seem very detached from you now.
Well, I think, you know, things like the chicken wearing the underwear in the other room, which isn't a great picture, but it's a great subject, I say. I mean, just, you know, the lighting. You know, if you were in a happy mood, you just laugh and go fab, but if you're in a slightly down mood, you see that it's deeply disturbing. It is a Louise Bourgeois kind of image.
And Sarah Lucas, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. But that's all to do with, it's quite simple, on New Year's Eve you have to wear red underwear to ensure good sex for the next 12 months. And this is even for chickens. I mean, one of the reasons I think that Naples is such a great city to photograph is that it's so familiar as a European city, and yet its soul is Indian or African or something like that. And I think that it's that sort of fight between familiar and unfamiliar that I find very exciting to photograph.
Is the outlaw, I mean, is the outlaw almost a cliche in Naples, or is it still viable to seek outlaws or outsiders there?
How do you mean? So,
well, transsexuals, or the pimps, or the people in the Camorra, or all those kinds of people are part of. Those are some of the people who have it.
I know, but in a weird way, they're not the outlaws. They're
they are the city.
I mean, I think that the Neapolitan has a very profound nervousness and disrespect for centralised government. I mean, so actually, Camorra, who are the locals who, if your husband's in jail, they supply you with your food and look after you and protect you, and are absolutely corrupt and horrible at the same time, are more trustworthy. I think centralised government's too much of an abstraction for the Neapolitan temperament. What they get is local criminal who will look after you. And in the same way, there's a fantastic place in Sanitac on La Fontanelle, where in the 17th century there was an epidemic where, again, they had an awful lot of them. There were so many dead they didn't know what to do with. And there was a kind of rough area of town, and there was a massive, great quarry cave which they built the original city out of the stone, tufa. So they poured all these bodies, they carried hundreds of thousands of bodies into this cave and bricked it up and left it there until the local population managed to find their way in, and then started looking after the corpses. And so each person would adopt a single skull and polish it and kiss it and pray for its soul on its way to heaven, in the hope that the soul on its way to heaven would keep an eye on this poor person in Sanitac. So it was a kind of two-way contract, which for the poor Neapolitan psyche is more easy to deal with than Catholic theology.
I realise I'm again the cultural cliche or stereotype, and I think you're right. I think Naples is a city that often defines itself, certainly in terms of the rest of Italy and perhaps in terms of Europe. It sees itself as outside, but that's in some sense its identity. Where I was trying to go. No, you didn't. No. It wasn't your answer. It's just that in the British art world of the 90s, of course, in a sense, the model of the avant-garde or artist as kind of outsiders or a kind of vanguard, in a sense, that culture evaporated anyway within the sort of mainstream, and everything had merged together. But I was just wondering whether psychologically or visually you were drawn to the outside, but actually, in a sense, you've answered the question, but yes, but that's a kind of meaningless thing in the areas that you are drawn to. Maybe you're drawn to areas where traditionally the outside has become the mainstream, it's just become more.
And
answer apart from yes.
Yes, but also I think I am very attracted to antiquity, and as I am to the contemporary, but I think the two are very interesting merged together.
Which means you'll be returning to the British art world as it ages gracefully. I thought it was very interesting. A few months ago, you said, "I wish I'd filmed it." The regret of not going to the baptism of the doll, but I wish I'd filmed it. And this idea about capturing something in the fourth dimension rather than the second, which is something you've started to explore, which I want to come on to in a minute, specifically the film Nowness. But do you distinguish significantly between the static image and the moving image, or are they all part of the same?
Well, I've never really, it was the first time I've ever used the moving image. But actually what's interesting about the film we're talking about is I drop stills into it. I think you respond to a still in a different way too. You have to respond to a still.
But are you moving towards working much more with moving image?
Well, I'd love to do so more in the future, but I still would. I still love it. I just think you contemplate still much more than you do a moving image.
You do. Are your still photographs? Do you perceive them fundamentally as static moments in an ongoing temporal narrative, which is the conventional way, or do you creatively often think in terms of narratives that there are staging posts of static images?
Well, that's one of the reasons that I love doing books, is how you take the static and then you edit it into a sequence. I just think the turning of the page and just seeing how, and that fabulous thing, you put this picture with another one and it works, and you put another one and you think that's great, and you put the fourth one in and it kills all three. I find that whole editing process really fascinating.
And the handling of exhibitions too, I guess.
And then therefore that's why when the Japanese film, my approach to editing a film is very much the way I would edit an exhibition or a book.
The film, now as you should explain, it was a fashion dimension to it, but it's interesting that you span it up, as I felt my interpretation, but you span it to make something that seemed very removed or remote from anything that was fashion based. And it's what Horiyoshi is one of the Japanese tattooists.
Horiyoshi III is one of Japan's greatest tattoo artists, and you get given the name Hori, which is a attached to Yoshi, his given name, his real name, and Hori means to carve. And people often talk about skins and tattoo being a canvas, but in this world, carving is much more. The word carving is much more appropriate because you're not painting onto a canvas, as you know, or painting on the skin. You're literally with sharpened bamboo, just digging into it, and the way you hit the skin creates gradations of like a brush strokes. And he's an absolutely extraordinary artist, but his clientele are criminals. I mean, tattoos in Yakuza culture in Japan are really the only people who have these complete body suits which start here and finish here. And the tattoo is always covered. It must always be covered by clothing. So traditionally you would never have this section tattooed because you would have a sort of kimono or some sort on. But now, because it's modern Western dress, they just have their literally stops here. So even a public swimming pool in Japan, you're not allowed to swim if you've got a tattoo of any form. So I found the whole thing interesting as sort of high art and low culture, because he's unquestionably a great artist.
And your access to him was through,
I mean, going out to do fashion story because he's associated. But there's kind of fascinating things that his son, who's a bit odd, I have to say, is he got tattooed by his father, and he was tattooed with these monochromatic images from ghost stories. And one of the figures he's tattooed with is this figure of revenge. She was a married woman who was pregnant, who was murdered by her husband and his mistress by having a knife put through her eye, grisly stuff, and she comes back to seek revenge. She's such a powerful figure of revenge that when Horiyoshi tattooed her on his son's back, he should have put an antidote to her curse. But he just ran out of time. And the next morning the son woke up, he was covered with hives all over his body with one eye like this. And it's kind of fabulous stuff.
He says, which is subtitled or translated in Alice, something about how you use unnatural colours. You're very conscious of the way that these colours are heightened, but you pretty well until that moment in that film, you use black and white. Is that something? Is colour something or unnatural colour or colour in any form? Is that something you may pursue, or is black and white?
And look, people, I always think if you put colour film in the camera, you take, but it's not that difficult.
No.
But I just think that
you've chosen not to.
I just think that the black and white is all about tone, and in colour it's all to do with colour. I mean, I think the two things are very similar. One's not that different to the other. But I think, very, very. I suppose if I'm absolutely honest, most of my influence is stuff in black and white cinema. I suppose that's what I can lay the blame. I mean, I love neorealist films too much.